G'day guys, welcome to Red Time for another week as we head into a bumper round 18. I'm Jarryd Barca, Jake Michaels is with me and we're here to chat through all the hot topics in the world of AFL. Jake, round 18, as I said, are you sold on the Bombers yet?
I am not. I think we're going to touch on the Bombers a little bit later today, but 99.9, how can we be? We spoke on Tuesday. Christian said it. They're losing the season at this point in time, according to percentage. So, look, am I totally saying that they can't do anything? Are they not going to win a final? I'm not saying that, but would be stunned if they won the premiership.
We will get to them shortly. Hey, one of the major stories of the week is, of course, Isaac Heeney. His one-match ban was upheld by the tribunal on Tuesday night, but the Swans have elected to appeal that decision, that hearing in front of the appeals board. No, not at all. That hearing will take place later today. Of course, we're recording this on Thursday morning. That'll take place at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time tonight. Firstly, does Isaac Heeney's striking offence warrant a one-game suspension?
I don't think it does, and there are a couple of reasons why. Look, let me preface this by saying I understand the rules were changed by the AFL at the beginning of the year. Now, I don't love the changes because I think the biggest issue here and the reason why it initially was a one-game suspension and the reason why the tribunal have upheld the decision is because the incident was deemed intentional. That's the key word here. Now,
which is the change that they made.
Yes,
yep.
But by definition of what happened and the way he was not looking at Webster when he threw his arm back into what he would have thought was the chest, proves it's not intentional in any way. It is the exact definition of careless. It is careless exactly as we know it to be. So the fact that it is now automatically intentional just doesn't make any sense in my book, and that's what's cost him. And that's why, barring some Paddy Cripps-like technicality at the appeals board, it's hard to see how they are going to get him off.
Yeah, the only issue I have is lumping all striking charges together in one sort of umbrella term. We're missing the part here where every single incident, the charge can be the same, but the incident is completely different. I think we need to start looking at it that way as well with the tribunal. That's the issue I have with the rule change that they made. I think context always matters, as you said. You got the striking offences when it's an argy-bargy jumper punch to the chin and they're getting fined, which I think that should be a fine, but then you compare it to Isaac Heeney, which I think is probably a more football action, and that's initially getting a one-match suspension. So that's where the difference is. That's where the frustration comes from for a lot of people.
Look at the one earlier in the year we spoke about on here when George Hewitt punched Lachie Neale.
George Hewitt and Jesse Hogan are the two clear examples of striking charges that meet the same criteria for the MRO and tribunal that are completely different incidents, and I think should be treated as such.
Yeah, and that's graded as careless. Yeah. So how can that be careless? How can I be standing next to you and punch you, but it shouldn't matter at all? How can I be standing next to you, swing, create a fist, swing, connect with you, regardless of the impact, and it be careless? That is as intentional as it gets. That's why it's incredibly frustrating that this rule change, it's so black and white. Yeah. And I think it's incredibly unfair on Isaac Heeney. And I think if I'm him, I'm devastated. Now, as I said, will he get off at the appeals board? It's hard to see it happening because I don't know what they can really argue to get off, given that this rule has changed. And I don't know. Is that rule? Are we going to have to revisit this rule? I'm not sure what happens from here.
Yeah, no, it is difficult to see.
I guess a sub-question to that is, should the AFL look at removing the fairness element to the Brownlow Medal, given that Isaac Heeney was one of the favourites, really has been all year?
Which is one of the major talking points about this, is the fact that he's a Brownlow chance. No, it's the umpire's award, and that fairness stipulation has always been there, and I think it should stay, even though we say that it's easier to get suspended these days, and sometimes there are non-malicious acts that are being sanctioned, a la Isaac Heeney, which we just spoke about. It's still the best and fairest award. So for me, there are just other awards to be won. It's not our fault, but we see the Brownlow Medal, and it is the most prestigious award that a player can win in the AFL.
So then it's unfair to say, there's other awards to be won. Of course there are.
Not real. I'm just saying that a better reflection. I understand that, but a better reflection on the best player of the year is, I would say, the Coach's Player of the Year award, because coaches, I would argue, have a better understanding and gauge on a game, on which players influence the game, on which players were the best player in the game.
The average person couldn't tell you who won the last 3 coaches awards.
No, but that's what I'm saying. So we see it as the most prestigious, and that's why this is the talking point. But the reality is this is the best and fairest award. A suspended player might be ineligible for the best and fairest, but there are other awards to be won, and every award is different. If we do change it to the best award, well, then every award's just the best award. So what's the point of having different awards?
Well, I get it's tough, different people are voting.
The fairest element needs to stay. It's the way it is.
I disagree, and this is not reactionary, and it will sound reactionary. I've said this for years, and you know my love affair with the Brownlow Medal. I've always thought it should be just the best player. In every other award, as you said, not just in footy, but any sport, it's always MVP, best. There's never any fairness element to it.
Our game's different.
Sorry?
Our game's different.
Yeah, okay, but the fairest element comes into the fact that if you are an unfair player, and if I punch you and I miss 8 weeks and I can still win it, then why should I? I've already been penalised by playing 8 games fewer than everyone else.
That's fair.
So why should I not be able to win it then? I think it should just be the best player. And let's be honest, do the umpires sit there at the end of the game when they're putting their 3-2-1 down and say, gee, Lachie Neale was great today. He was the best player on the ground, but he was barking at me all game, and he didn't give the ball back for a ball up at one point. I don't think he was very fair. Let's ding him a vote and drop him down to 2.
You might be surprised. The umpires know that there's a fairest element in it. No, that's realistic.
The umpires are voting on the 3 best players, or at least they should be. Sometimes they get it wrong, just like the coaches do. But I think it's time to get rid of it. And it's not just, like I said, it's not just because Heeney may miss out. And let's be honest, if Heeney if he doesn't get off at the appeals board and he is ineligible to win the award, and he finishes top, everyone is going to cry and say it's an outrage and all of that. Yes. But it's not just if he finishes the night on top. If he finishes 3 votes, 2 votes, 1 vote behind, or obviously tied, then there is an injustice because he has missed a game at home against North Melbourne, where he would be just as good a chance as any to be polling votes this week. So he is going to miss out on an opportunity to win that award this weekend if he's not able to play. And I think that in itself is a travesty.
Yeah, I think it's just like the fairest element maybe we can rehash because, as I said, there are incidents where it is easier to be suspended. Maybe we can change it so the fairness element can better reflect the changes that we've made elsewhere in the competition. But the fairness aspect, I think, is still a part of that award. We need to move on. There was other huge news this week as well, which happened over in the West, Jake. What's your biggest takeaway from West Coast's decision to part ways with Adam Simpson?
Well, let me just preface this one by saying this is 100% speculation and my opinion. There's no fact or anything on this. It's just what I thought and what I sort of took away seeing it all unfold, watching his final press conference, etc. I got the impression that Adam Simpson, firstly, I've never seen a coach in that position look so angry. Usually there's sadness, leaving the job, and there's sort of an acknowledgement that things weren't going right and it's time for change. I've never seen a coach, maybe I'm just forgetting an obvious one, but I'd love to hear another one if anyone can think of one. I've never seen a coach that just looks so angered in that position.
He seemed dirked. You won't be alone in that, yeah.
I get the impression he was lied to. I get the impression that he knew that this rebuild was going to take a lot of time. He's gone to the club and I'm stressing that this is what my opinion is. He's gone to the club and said, this rebuild is going to take time. It's not a 1 year down, we're back up again sort of deal. This is going to be 3 to 5 years of a hard slog, getting young players back through the door. Because we said it 4 or 5 years ago on the podcast, there was not much young talent. Yep, the Eagles were winning games. They looked good. They obviously won that premiership in 2018. But there was not much coming through. Certainly players coming through weren't getting opportunity to play at the senior level. It was going to take time to build it back up again. I think he sort of said, I'm happy to be that man to lead us back out of this. But I need the assurance that you're going to offer me and afford me the time to be able to do it, because it's not going to be an 18-month fix. I think he's probably been given that assurance. And then as the poor season after poor season has sort of mounted, as the pressure has come from the fans, as clearly pressure has come from the playing group, I think the Eagles and the board have sort of thought, well, we can't just sit on our hands and do nothing. We have to make some change. And whether you want to call him the sacrificial lamb or the scapegoat or whatever you want to say, I think he's the easiest person to pin it all on. And removing him from his job shows that they are looking to do something. They are looking to make a change, and they aren't satisfied with what's going on. And I think that's probably why he's annoyed, because he could have, had he known that he wouldn't have been given the full allotment of time, he could have done a Damien Hardwick. He could have said, right, I can see we're about to go over the hill now. I can see things are going to get far worse before they pick up again. Why would I stay around? And risk my legacy being tainted?
That's a fair assessment. I think my main point was, I just wonder how much these past few seasons will tarnish his legacy. I hope it doesn't. I think it will in some areas of the footy public. But the reality is he coached an interstate team who have to travel most weeks to 6 final series, 2 grand finals, a premiership, until these last few seasons, which were atrocious. And by the way, the criticism was warranted when a team's performing the way that it is. But you go back to the prior to these last 3 seasons, there were 8 other years he was there. In 6 of them, they made finals at least. In the other 2, they finished 9th. So they were largely competitive the whole time. And obviously that premiership against a Victorian club in 2018, I talk about that a lot, how the Victorian club should always be favoured and more likely to win those games. Like, that achievement shouldn't be...
It's only happened twice in the last 18 years.
Yeah, correct. It shouldn't be undersold how big that is. So for, how bad the last 3 years were, and they were bad, let's not lose sight of what else he was actually able to achieve in his 11-year tenure there.
How long will it be before he's coaching again at the senior level?
Well, there's always assistant coaching options out there around the country. Do you reckon he'd go back into one of those roles, or do you reckon he's one of those people who just wants to be a head coach? He's clearly good enough to be a head coach.
Yeah, I think he will be a head coach. But this is
there'll be clubs that are naturally after him.
Oh, I think for sure. And this is my point. I asked the office this almost tongue-in-cheek the other day. I said, is Adam Simpson a good coach? Because...
Of course he is.
But, but of course you say that. He won a premiership. He took them to another grand final. They had many seasons at the top, challenging. And as you said, it's much harder doing it when you're a team outside of Victoria, particularly over in the West.
Yeah.
But then he's had this period. So this is why I've always been so big on, you are only as good as your playing group. So it just doesn't sound right to say, Adam Simpson's a great coach because he won a premiership, but also Adam Simpson's a terrible coach because he won 8 games or whatever it was in the last 3 seasons.
Yeah.
The truth is somewhere in the middle. I think Adam Simpson is a good coach, but like any coach, like we've seen with Alistair Clarkson, you see with Damien Hardwick, you're only as good as the playing group. He knew that it was going to take time for this playing group to get to a position where they can forget challenging for a premiership or even making finals, like to be able to win a game.
Yeah. They were an ageing list, as you said, and maybe there were some list management, some poor list management decisions that were made as well that led to all of this. I think it all impacts it. It's not just one area.
Speaking of recent premiers, Collingwood find themselves in a little bit of trouble at the moment.
Just a little bit.
Do you think they can get themselves back into contention?
No, they're just not.
Not at all.
They're just not a good team right now, are they? So to me, they don't look desperate. The hunger isn't there.
Do you think that's because they won it last year?
I don't know. It's always hard to say, and that people within the club would always tell you that no, it's not that. They're always inspired to go out and win games of footy. So it's hard to say that, but they've been decimated by injury as well. And Jamie Elliott comes back this week, but they lose Myercheck for the season, and Jeremy Howe is unlikely to play this week as well. So it seems like they go 1 step forward, 2 steps back on the injury front this year. I think their game plan's been picked apart. Their pressure game has been taken away from them, and then they've got some top players that are out of form as well. You just add all of those little things together, and it compounds into one underachieving season. I think that's the reality. And then you can look at their fixture as well. We spoke about this before we hit record, Jake. They got Geelong this week is tough. Hawthorn next week on current form is an even matchup. They've still got Carlton, Brisbane and Sydney at the SCG to come. It's just hard to see them winning enough games to scrape into the 8. I think they can scrape into the 8. I'm putting a line through them in terms of premiership contention. Clearly.
So you're saying there's no way they're winning the premiership this year?
They're not winning a premiership. I'll eat that footy if they win a premiership. Like, it's just not happening. So, yeah, you'd be foolish to rule them out. I think their list is in an okay position to be there again somewhat in 2025 and do something similar to the Cats. I think there's enough talent and experience still there. But as far as 2024 goes, they're not going to be there on prelim final weekend. Albeit, I won't be surprised if they do make finals and maybe win one.
I will meet you halfway. I think it's going to be extremely tough. I think they're obviously, if the season ended today, they're gone. So it's going to be tough to get back in and stay in. You mentioned the last 7 games. Cats, Hawks, Tigers, Blues, Swans, Lions, Demons. So they probably only start favoured in 2. Yeah. Hawthorn, Richmond, they're probably the only 2 they're definitely starting favourite in at this point in time.
Yep.
So now we know that they can still win games if they're not the favourite, but it gives you an idea of they're going to have to win probably 3 that they're not expected to win just to make it. So it's going to be very tough. Now,
if they don't beat Geelong this week, they'll need to beat Carlton or Sydney or both of them. They'll need to beat
both. Yeah, absolutely. Now, can I write them off? No, I'm not going to write them off just yet not because of what they've done last year, because I think that's last year, and this is a different team. There's so many different circumstances. I think the reason I'm not writing them off is because I don't think as much as Sydney has impressed me throughout the year, and as much as I've been big on Carlton, those 2 sides have come back to the pack somewhat. There's no one else. Who is the 3rd best team? I asked this question the other day and I got 5 different answers. Someone said Freo, someone said Essendon, someone said the Bulldogs, someone said Brisbane. I'm getting all these different answers. I don't know who the 3rd best team is. I'm not saying it's Collingwood, but I think if there is a year that we can get a surprise result, we can get someone from outside the top 4 winning it, or at least making it. I think Collingwood could be that team. I don't think anyone's going to want to play them in a final.
I don't think many teams would want to play them in the finals, you're right. But I do think there's a little bit too much going against them right now.
I'm not
and what their profile is right now and the way that they're playing, and you're seeing all these stats of what their downfall is, it's just hard to see them doing it right at this moment.
Yeah, I'm not picking it, but I'm in no way prepared to write them off at this point in time with 7 games left in the season.
Speaking of the Pies, Josh Carmichael has become the 4th player just this year to retire due to concussion, and the 2nd Pie after Nathan Murphy as well. How concerned should the AFL be over the increase of these medical retirements?
They should be, and I think they clearly are, extremely concerned. This is something the AFL, the clubs, players, fans, nobody wants this, quite obviously. And it's not just because we're losing the player, or in this case, now 4 players this season, and we go back last year, same sort of thing. I think it's because of the long-term implications. And I think that's probably something that we haven't considered as much as we probably should have over the last sort of 24 months. Have we stopped to think what might happen 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the track in terms of participation rates at grassroots level, Auskick, how many kids are playing the sport? Is it outrageous to say, because I don't think it is, that parents today, because we know so much more about concussion, we know so much more than we ever did, even 10 years ago, we know a lot more today. Is it crazy to say that parents won't want their kids playing footy and knowing that this is happening, knowing these long-term implications, and say, we'd rather be playing this sport or that sport or taking up another hobby? I don't think it's crazy to say that. And I think that is a concern the AFL really should have as a long-term risk to the competition.
Yeah, that's an interesting angle and way to look at it. I haven't thought about it that way myself. I think the game hasn't changed in terms of kids going out there on the weekend and running around kicking the footy and marking the footy. The way the kids approach the game when they're just playing and mucking around with mates is all the same, but you're talking about obviously the concern in a parent's mind and the risk and the safety factor for their kids. And that's
the
only
players
natural
as well. I mean, a 5-year-old kid running around is not going to be thinking about long-term concussion issues. But once you're an adult,
you're aware, and we're more aware of it now.
100%. And when you're getting that, the doctor's recommendation now, people are taking it far more seriously because of what we know about how serious it is. Yep. It's not blowing your ACL, spending 12 months or whatever to get it to rehab it, and then you're back to mostly full fitness. This is something that you will live with for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And you can't blame these players from walking out on it.
Yeah, it's natural for parents to care about the health and safety of their kids, but whether that impacts grassroots or junior participation levels is something to be seen moving forward. It's interesting.
I think the AFL has to be keeping a very close eye on that.
They probably are too.
For sure. Back to this week, which team are most desperate for the 4 points in round 18?
With the ladder as tight as it is, we speak about it every week, a lot of clubs are desperate. I mean, in terms of the race for finals, there are clubs jostling for positions, and just sitting out of the 8, you've got Collingwood, Melbourne, the Western Bulldogs and Gold Coast, who naturally, for obvious reasons, are desperate for wins this week.
So it's one of them?
I still think, I'll explain why it's not. I still think Essendon, they're 6 points in it, they're well entrenched in finals, but I'm looking at it from a perception point of view and what Essendon wants to be and what we're supposed to think of them as a club. I'm not sold on them. I probably think more of them than maybe you do, and I was saying that in pre-season they could be anything this year. It doesn't shock me to see them in the finals right now. But the reality is they're 4th with a percentage of 99. We don't ever see that at this stage of the season. And
I don't think we've ever
Christian
seen that.
Joly said on the Tuesday podcast as well that the latest a team has been in the top 4 with a percentage below 100 was 2000. That's a quarter of a century ago. So for me, there's just still a lot for them to prove. And last week was built up as the match where they finally took a scalp and finally beat someone. We just spoke
But you don't rate Collingwood.
We just spoke about Collingwood. I just think that Essendon last week beat an average football team that a lot of teams would have beaten.
Yeah.
So for me,
it's not a scalp.
It didn't do anything. It didn't sell me anything on Essendon. So, the D's, they don't have Max Gawn. You have to be beating them. It tells us a lot this week, I think, if they can't back up last week's win and beat Melbourne as well, who also aren't travelling at their best. I have tipped Essendon, by the way, and I think they will win, but they'd want to.
I know this is opinion, so there's no wrong answer, but that feels like a wrong answer. It has to be one of those 4 teams that you mentioned that sits outside.
As I said, I took a different lens on it.
And has to either keep tabs with the top 8 or jump back in. And the team that I'm singling out is the team they're playing, Melbourne. I think quite clearly they must win this weekend. We just spoke about Collingwood's run home, which is extremely tough. I think Melbourne has the toughest run home of any side. So it's Essendon this week, Freo in Perth, then the Giants, Dogs, Power, Suns, Pies. Every team they play is either in the 8 or, one of those teams we mentioned that are a game away from jumping back in. They've all got something to play for. There is no easy game for Melbourne. You said it. They're out without Max Gawn. They're obviously without Christian Petrarca for the rest of the season. They must win. And if they don't win, they really feel, not to be too over the top, but they really feel maybe 2 losses away from 3 straight years of just catastrophe in terms of total underperformance.
Not winning a final.
Not winning a final since that grand final triumph. And if you told anyone that day after they belted the Bulldogs in Perth that the Demons would go the next 3 years and not win a final, you would be laughed at.
They'd be one of the more underachieving
It is
premiers.
the most... It's shaping as one of the most wasted lists in recent footy, in modern footy history. And I don't think that's hyperbole. I just think if they are to lose the next couple of games, then they probably don't make finals. And I think there is extreme pressure. Now that Adam Simpson's gone, I think the coach with under the next most amount of pressure is Simon Goodwin and Luke Beveridge, and they're kind of neck and neck at the moment. They really need to win this game. And as you said, they're without some key players. They're going to have to find a way to win.
Who'd you tip?
Essendon.
Fair enough. Last question of the day. Geelong has hit some form again, Jake. There might be a common denominator. I just want to set the scene for you before I do give you this question, though. So with Tom Hawkins out of the team, you've noticed Jezza Cameron staying closer to goal. He was awesome against the Hawks last week. Gary Rowan's last couple of weeks, averaging 12 touches, 6 marks and 2 goals, which is everything you want to see from someone like him. Obviously, you've had Tom Stewart move into the midfield and a few other magnets. Chris Scott wasn't afraid to move around. Ollie Henry's coming back into the team. I think there's a little bit more unpredictability about the way the Cats are playing right now, and it begs the question, are they better off without Tom Hawkins?
I know these last couple of results and the eye test will sort of tell you, and I think you're sort of going down that path.
I'm in the middle, but happy to be swayed.
There might be a few that are saying yes, they are. And I don't know. I actually don't know the answer. What I do know is that there is no way the Cats are playing a final. So Tom Hawkins is going to be out for another 6 weeks?
6 to 8, yeah.
6 to 8 weeks. He's going to be back around the time, or you'd think he'd be full fitness around the time finals roll around. And we think now where Geelong is, they're going to be playing at minimum an elimination final. So I can't see a world in which the Cats are playing that final and Tom Hawkins isn't in the team if he's fit. Now, and that's not just out of a nod to Tom Hawkins because of the player he's been and the servant he's been for the club. I think it's because they truly will feel that he makes that side better, even though he's had a lean, a patch in the middle of the year particularly, of pretty lean form. 2 games there in the year, back-to-back bags of 4 goals. I don't think he's the liability that some have made out in the last sort of 2 weeks that Geelong's had a couple of decent wins. I just don't think he is at all. I think he's a player that can still win you a match or take over a quarter because he doesn't rely on explosiveness or speed. It's that one-on-one work. I think if you can get the right matchup, you can keep him in the goal square. Cameron has been good closer to home. I'm not saying that. But I still think Hawkins has value this season. I think what it does tell you with Hawkins not in the team, though, at the moment, is that the concern about what's going to be the next chapter for the Cats probably isn't as concerning as what we may have thought a few weeks ago. I think there is proof that, look, Shannon Neal is not Tom Hawkins. He's not ever going to be Tom Hawkins. But I think he can grow into a player that they can rely on. Now, Jeremy Cameron and Gary Rowan, they're not young players, but they're not going to. They've still got footy left in them. And then some of the younger, smaller guys have shown plenty too. So I think there's enough there to feel confident over the next sort of 2 or 3 years. But for this season, the Cats, I think they are better when Tom's in the side.
It's week 1 of the finals. Tom Hawkins knocks on Chris Scott's door.
He's playing.
You playing him?
He's playing, 100%.
There you go.
You can't tell me the Cats. I will eat the footy if he's healthy and going into the first week of finals and they don't play.
Fair call. Time to wrap things up, Jake. Thank you for your time. We'll speak to you again next week. To everyone at home, thanks for listening. Don't forget to put your tips in and enjoy the footy.